Inspiration, author's interpretation, and reader's perception interact to form a comprehensive lesson. To deepen this understanding, let's utilize some biblical examples that reflect these interactions. Inspiration is the initial idea or motivation that sparks the creation of the lesson. It could come from personal experiences, other literature, cultural events, or the desire to communicate a specific message. Inspiration acts as the seed that leads to the author's creative process. Interpretation is the process through which the author takes the inspiration and molds it into the form of a lesson. The author's interpretation determines the structure, style, and content of the lesson based on their personal perspective, knowledge, and creative flair. It shapes how the lesson is presented, establishing the framework through which the reader engages with it. The reader's perception is the final piece in the triad where the lesson is absorbed and understood. This perception is influenced not only by the author's interpretation, but also by the reader's own experiences, cultural background, and biases. The reader's interpretation completes the cycle by closing the loop with their understanding of the lesson, which may differ from what the author initially intended. In the Book of Psalms, the various authors were often inspired by their personal experiences, cultural events, or divine revelation. Consider Psalm 137, where the author is inspired by the Babylonian captivity. This profound emotional and cultural experience shapes the poem's lamentation over Zion. The personal and collective grief translates into a poignant interpretation that captures not only the sorrow, but also the hope and yearning for justice and restoration. The parables of Jesus, such as the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke, October 25, 37, demonstrate how the author's interpretation, Jesus' delivery and framing of the story, shapes readers' perceptions. Jesus uses the story to redefine the concept of neighbor and to teach about mercy and compassion. Each reader, depending on their own cultural background and personal experiences, may perceive the parable differently, extracting lessons about ethics, community responsibility, or divine love. The letters of Paul, particularly Romans, offer an excellent example of how readers' perceptions can inspire further theological exploration and literary creation. Paul's interpretations of Christ's teachings and his insights into Christian living have inspired countless sermons, theological debates, and personal reflections that, in turn, engage with and expand the Christian doctrine. These three elements coexist symbiotically. Without inspiration, the lesson wouldn't start. Without the author's interpretation, it wouldn't be structured. And without the reader's perception, the lesson wouldn't be complete. Each component is essential to the whole.
In the creation of the Book of Job, the interplay is clear. The inspiration from Job's suffering and the question of divine justice coexist with the author's complex, poetic, and prose interpretation, which then challenges the reader to perceive divine justice and human suffering from multiple perspectives.
The inspiration leads to the author's interpretation, which directly impacts the reader's perception. When the cycle works well, the lesson's inspiration is reinforced through successful interpretation and reception.
The prophecy of Isaiah shows a clear line from divine inspiration through prophetic interpretation to the audience's perception.
Isaiah's visions of peace and restoration, such as in Isaiah 2 verse 4, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares," were intended to inspire hope and lead to moral and spiritual reforms among the people. If the author's interpretation is not clear or aligned with the inspiration, it might result in an incomplete lesson that fails to convey the intended message, affecting the reader's perception and feedback. An example can be seen in the misunderstanding of Jesus' teachings in the Gospels. At times, the disciples' interpretations did not align with Jesus' original messages, leading to corrections from Jesus himself, which illustrates how misinterpretation can influence the intended inspirational message. The biblical narrative is rich with examples of how inspiration, author interpretation, and reader perception interact dynamically. These interactions not only shape the understanding of the scriptures themselves, but also influence the broader development of Christian thought and community practices. Understanding this triadic relationship helps in crafting messages and lessons that are more resonant and impactful, whether in religious instruction, sermon delivery, or spiritual writing. These dynamics are pivotal in shaping not just individual beliefs, but also collective practices within the community. And it's through these narratives that we see the profound impact on cultural norms and values over generations.